Okay, we will introduce yourself later. We can start our program now. At first, the main key paper will be start now. I would like to request Joshua Castellino, Executive Director of Minority Rights Group International UK. Please start your keynote paper.
Thank you, Mahbul, and good morning, colleagues. And it's a great pleasure and honor to be given this role. So thank you very much for that. I want to speak to you a little bit about the historical discrimination of minorities, but instead of just focusing on what is really a negative and depressing picture in our region, I want to finish with what I think are 7 or 8 key steps that we need to take as civil society and as countries as well to rethink the future. So if we look at the region itself, we have to ask ourselves exactly what is South Asia and what exactly is the parameters of this region. We seem to have acquired a very colonial mindset in thinking about states and thinking about communities, as if that there was no other arrangement possible, and that the state, the sovereign state that we inherited from the British, and this also goes for Myanmar, for Bangladesh, for India, for Pakistan, for Nepal, for Bhutan, for Sri Lanka, as if that's the only identity that the region has ever had. And I want to basically challenge you to think through a longer period of history than just the last 75 years, because we have a tendency in international society to be able to only think through the future based on the parameters of the last 50 or 80 years. And we ask ourselves, why is that? Especially when you look at our region, the fact is that lines drawn on maps by colonizers to protect their own interests has effectively given us the states that we have. And this is not only a question in South Asia, it's all over the world. As Minority Rights Group International, we also work in Africa, we also work in East Asia, we also work in Eastern Europe and in other parts of the world. And we see the same trend. This idea that the lines that have been drawn on the maps by people who have no understanding or interest in the communities there somehow become the only way to measure what happens next. Obviously, it's very important for us when we think about minorities, because how you draw the line decides who's a minority. And how you draw that particular line ultimately decides who gets power and who gets to set the rules. So I want to challenge you a little bit to just think beyond the state, especially when we think about our region. And this is important because of the fact that we are facing a contemporary reality at the moment where hate speech is normal. Identity politics has become absolutely the key to being able to gain power. And governance is unable to answer the major questions that society is facing. So if we look at what is happening in the region, in the sub-region, and the world at large, there are 2 very, very major threats that we face. The first threat that we face is, how do you create a just economy that is basically able to live within planetary boundaries? Climate change has been talked about for a long time. The inter-party report that has come out has made clear that this is the biggest and most urgent crisis we face. And this crisis will not be solved unless we make a just transition of the society we have right now into a society that can live more sustainably. But to be able to understand how we got to this point with regards to climate change, we have to understand that this is based on the extractive model, an extractive economic model that has treated nature as zero value, that has allowed people to extract as much as they want from nature, that has allowed the creation of supply chains, the stimulation of markets, and the consequence is that materials picked out of the ground have little value to the person who's picking it out of the ground, but suddenly began to get more and more value as they are exported and arrive at OECD countries, at the wealthy countries. So you have a supply chain that starts in places like South Asia or Sub-Saharan Africa, where the people who are actually doing the work to extract this material from the ground get almost zero return. But somehow that product, as it appears in countries like the UK, where I am, suddenly has immense value. And that value that it has gained along the supply chain is not going anywhere towards the people who are picking it or towards the people in which country it's originating. This is also a problem because we assume that taking something out of the ground has zero value to nature. We're not worrying about what it costs to replenish it. We're not worrying about what it costs to figure out the damage it's causing. We're simply taking it out of the ground, creating value as we go along the supply chain. That value is not coming back to the communities. So this has become a form of institutionalized wealth extraction from countries like South Asia. And that wealth is being transported to countries like Britain or the wider OECD countries, the countries of the Organization of Cooperation and Development, basically the 24 richest countries in the world. And the consequence of this is that wealth is being created. But don't get me wrong here, this is not only a colonial legacy. This system started during colonial eras, and let's also bear in mind that European colonization was not the first type of colonization that existed and was not necessarily even the worst type of colonization that existed. When you look at history from a wider lens, you will see there have been other attempts at colonization that have been more brutal, that have been more devastating. But European colonization is different from the others in that it created structures that seemed to be long-lasting, and it created structures that hastened planetary devastation, because the extractive model that has been created has then been exploited by post-colonial governments. And the only difference is that now, instead of white people benefiting from it, you have brown people benefiting from it, or you have other people benefiting from it. So all that you've created in the context of the extractive model and European colonization is the transfer of power from white overlords to brown overlords. Those brown overlords exist and work within a state, most of which in our region are democracies. But democracies have to be understood as not just a game of numbers, but a game of values. If democracies become a game of numbers, what you have is populism winning the day. And this is the trend that we see in all of our countries. There's this strand of populism that wins the day. And what this strand is doing is that you have a box that has been drawn. And within the box that has been drawn, you say, I want to be king. And I call this scapegoat politics. You want to be king. Imagine there's 10 children in a playground, and there's one of those who wants to be king for that day. The way in which he tries, and it's almost always a man, so I use he because it's almost always gender too. The way he tries to gain power is he tries to make sure that he picks on one of the 10 children. So if we imagine a playground and imagine there's 10 children, and imagine maybe one child is disabled, has a disability of some kind. Instead of being able to understand what the answers are to the questions of how the playground should be run, one of these people who wants to be king starts pointing to the disabled child and says, that disabled child doesn't deserve a chance to play on the swing because they're disabled. They should stay aside and let other people swing. The result of that is they've picked one person who's different, and they've convinced the other 9 that now the 9 are a majority. So the problem of discrimination in South Asia is actually the creation of artificial majorities, and artificial majorities based on whatever trend you might want. Of course, we know the major trend in the region is to pick religion as a majority and to pick religion and mobilize people. And it's ironic, isn't it? Because South Asia, and I think as South Asians widely, we are communities that are deeply spiritual, and that are deeply spiritual in this, and religion plays a big role in that spirituality. But when that religion is turned into a political force, and when that religion is turned into a weapon of hate, it destroys the spirituality, but it might create an artificial majority. So we have elections that are being won by political parties that can use religion, not religion in the sense of its spirituality and what it has to offer, but religion as a tool, as a weapon to generate hate and to generate anger against somebody else, and then to use that anger to mobilize politics to become king for the day. And that is what we have. And that's the consequence of where we are today. But where we are today is really also a result of the fact that lines have been drawn on these maps that have divided communities for a long time. It's interesting that divide and rule politics that we've studied in our histories has now become such an important part of our contemporary life, that is dividing communities from each other, that is sowing hate with a goal to try and gain political power. Why is this so disastrous? This is disastrous because actually, of course, there's a direct impact on minorities, and minorities across the region are incredibly vulnerable. They are possibly the most vulnerable they have ever been in the history. And it's not a history. I don't want to give the impression that this is a history of always being peaceful. It's not. There have always been conditions, there have always been tensions, but there have always been in our societies people who are progressive and people who are committed to peace, and people, scholars and intellectuals and others, and women's movement playing a big role, have always been there to be able to bring our societies back to rethink the value of peace and prosperity. If we don't have that catch and that safety valve, what you get is a descent into a kind of feudal society where might is right, and where eventually those who can claim power and then maintain their hold on power by generating hate. And that's the contemporary situation that we do have in each of our countries. And it's a real threat because this is a time when we need unity. We desperately need unity among our populations. We need them irrespective of the religions we have, irrespective of the languages we speak, and irrespective of any aspirations we might have. Because ultimately, we are facing an existential threat from climate change. India and Pakistan, especially right now, the heat wave is not stopping at the border. The heat wave doesn't need a visa. The heat wave doesn't need a passport or a nationality. These heat waves are going to hit, and they're going to get stronger and stronger, and the vulnerable populations are going to be left behind. In the meantime, what we do have, and in Bangladesh, of course, the rising sea levels are a major, major driver. So you have a mass population, you have a real threat, a threat that comes from nature. And instead of galvanizing to be able to address the threat, what we seem to be doing is the politics of painting buildings a different color and then celebrating it and becoming very fervent and very passionate about what color the building should be. So one country wants to paint the building orange and wants to push all those who believe the building should be painted green out. The other country wants to paint the building green, and they want to push all those who want to have saffron out. And this silly game of children is creating a lot of distraction. What we have right now is a politics of mass distraction. That's what we have. But the politics of mass distraction is also giving us a real chance that what we are going to end up with is destruction. And that politics of mass distraction at this critical time is really important to contend. So that's the situation that we face. And this is why we need to think beyond just boundaries that have been drawn on maps that have, first of all, divided South Asia into different countries. And then we need to think beyond the ethnic groups and the linguistic groups and the religious groups, which have traditionally lived in the entire region in relative harmony, but now really run the risk. Citizenship stripping is a major feature. Rohingya colleagues will tell us about that. They are living this experience right now, but Assamese colleagues will tell you that they face that threat too. Let's understand one element of this too. The state, even though it's new and 75 years old, a little bit more than 75 years old, the state is only one period of time. It has only been there for a fixed period of time. A government is even shorter in life. A government is only there temporarily through mandates. The government cannot decide who belongs where. It's not up to the government to decide. It's not the government's choice. This is essentially who belongs where is a reality of history. It's a reality of intermingling. It's a reality of intermarriage. It's a reality of migration. It's not up to the government of the day to decide, no, you can live in my house or you can't live in my house. The government is merely a temporary hold on power. We cannot allow the government, any government, anywhere in the world, to decide who and which community should belong where. It's simply not a choice that has been asked of them. The choice that they have been given is a choice to govern. And the choice to govern today means addressing climate change, finding a way to have a just transition, and finding a way, and this is a big challenge, finding a way to create economic growth while creating jobs. See, in the past, if you were a rich woman or a rich man and you had, I don't know, 1 lakh, 2 lakh rupees, and you wanted to make 10 lakh rupees, what you would do is you would use money as a factor of production, and then you would hire people and you would try and build something, or you would try and sell something. And that's how you would generate your wealth. But in doing that, what you often did is you had to hire labor. And if you hired labor, you had to give labor some kind of a wage, and that then built the economy, because the people who got the wage could spend the wage on what it is that you were creating and what other rich people were creating. That economy is changing because of mechanization. So now if you are a rich person and you have 1 or 2 lakhs and you want to make 10 lakhs, it makes more sense for you to invest it somewhere. And it makes more sense for you to use financial markets to be able to get a return on your investment. Labor is becoming redundant because of mechanization. Jobs are disappearing. When jobs disappear, you have people who get into deeper and deeper poverty. And we have now entrenched poverty in our region. In fact, you could argue that in the 75 or 80 years since the departure of the last colonial ruler, actually the countries have been incredibly poor at eradicating poverty. So it's not about the current governments. The governments in general in the region have not been able to understand the rich wealth that exists in the human population. Instead, wealth has become concentrated in a few hands, and those hands have essentially become incredibly wealthy, while the rest of our sisters and brothers have been left in relative poverty, irrespective of what their ethnic group is or the language group is, or whether they are majority or minority. So the result is you've got an anger in the societies, and that anger is becoming more and more acute because prices are rising, things are getting scarce. You're literally in a situation where climate change is beginning to have a major impact. Conditions are getting more difficult to live in, and there is this anger there. And the anger is towards previous governments. And that anger is understandable because previous governments have been unable to eradicate poverty and lift populations out of the poverty. This is a real contrast to somewhere like East Asia, for instance, including Korea or China or Japan, which have had entrenched poverty too. These communities too have faced entrenched poverty, but they have managed to create governance. And not all of them have been democratic, as we know, but they have managed to create governments that have lifted people out of poverty. We have not had that in our region. We have had instead people who have taken the reins of governance, who come from backgrounds where they have looked after their own interest, but they have not had a wider enough interest. And now this has become acute because now this anger is directed at all political systems. So what you have is an anti-politics, and that anti-politics is resulted in scapegoats. And the scapegoats then have resulted in this narrow, identity-oriented politics that we have. So much for the problems. What kind of, and I want to finish with, just in the last 6 minutes left for me, I want to finish with some starting points for how it is that we do this. First of all, colleagues, we have to accept the fact that we have to be agents of change. And that, I don't just mean us in the smaller group that we are here, but in a wider group, in our societies, in our communities. And we have to, that change has to be achieved collectively. This is not about, we have to avoid the divide and rule that has brought us here. We have to work across boundaries. We have to work collectively to get this. So I suggest to you that there's at least a few things that we can do. First of all, what we have to do is understand that our societies are deeply patriarchal. In not being able to understand the potential that women have to offer, we are essentially already taking 50% out of our systems. 50% of the talent that exists in South Asia is more or less not able to express itself and achieve itself because of the patriarchal systems we have. And this patriarchy occurs in questions of inheritance. This patriarchy occurs in questions of gendered roles. This occurs in the way in which our legal systems are set up. These legal systems are deeply patriarchal. They come from our own cultural histories, which are deeply patriarchal, but they also come from a British-oriented legal system, which is deeply patriarchal. So the first point really here is understanding and realizing that dismantling societal and institutional patriarchies is the first step. Secondly, and this is where the just transition issue comes in, we have to challenge and transform the extractive economic model, because this is what is driving climate change. we can maybe start putting your lights off or using an electric car, and that's good. But what we need is system-wide change, accepting that some industries simply cannot be allowed to exist. We have to simply stop and turn off fossil fuel industries. And we might think, well, how will we work? And yes, there will be a major transition. But the fact is, colleagues, that the technology for that transition has existed for a long time. It has just been suppressed by fossil fuel corporations. We've known about electric cars for a long time. We've known that tobacco is dangerous for a long time. We've known about climate change for a long time, but the science is suppressed. And the science is suppressed because lots of the wealthy elites in our societies are deeply connected with the extractive model. And actually in South Asia, we have examples of what sustainable models are. We have to learn from our Adivasi communities, from our indigenous communities, about a society that can live in a sustainable manner that is in harmony with nature, and not one that is driven by want and need and consumerism that simply exploits nature as an infinite resource, which it is not. So challenging and transforming the extractive economic model, I would say, is second. Thirdly, we have to seek accountability for contemporary economic actors damage to society. Let's face it, the climate change that exists right now, the pollution that is swallowing our cities, is being caused by industries that are polluting. Those industries are getting a return on their investment, but that return on investment is not being used to address the damage they are doing. We have to hold economic actors responsible for the pollution that they are causing and for the damage that they are causing. And that means using legal techniques of tort law and understanding how it is that you can assess the crime of tort and be able to find an evidential chain to make sure that the people who do the damage pay for the damage. And that is vital in terms of understanding economic costs, because the people who are making the wealth out of the economy are simply assuming a zero environmental return. They're not assuming that they have any responsibility with regards to that at all. Fourthly, the third one was about contemporary crime. The fourth one is about historical crime. We have to understand and hold historical actors responsible for the crimes they have committed. And by that I mean the colonial ruler. By that I mean understanding the wealth transfer system that has been created, that has taken wealth out of countries in South Asia and brought it to places like Europe and created big cities and huge engines that are driving the global economy. Unless we hold and create a mechanism to understand colonial crime and the damage it's done, this is not about blaming, this is about the money. This is not about saying, oh, you are responsible. This is about saying, this is what you got as a consequence of the crime. And this is the way in which you have to repatriate that wealth back to the areas in which it came. So colonial crime is the fourth element to it. The fifth element then is the leave no one behind principle. We are only as strong as our weakest link. If anything, the pandemic showed that very clearly. If you leave the pandemic festering in a slum somewhere in Dhaka or Mumbai or in Lahore or in Colombo, it will come back to you. It will come back to you because your economy won't be able to open. It's as simple as that. So understanding the weakest link is key, and the sustainable development goals and the leave no one behind principle is key. We can't be in this system by which it's I and me and what I want, and I will take what I want and everybody else can go to hell. Tough luck for them. That society doesn't work. It creates political tensions, it creates fragmentation, it creates want. And as the pandemic has shown us, it's not even pragmatic. If we had a global vaccine, if the global vaccine that had been created had been released all across the world free of charge, we would have been in a situation where the pandemic would have ended a lot sooner. It's straightforward. In fact, we as Minority Rights Group made a complaint to the Committee for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, and they agreed with us. There is a statement that I can share with you that says the hoarding of vaccine by the global north is creating structural discrimination. So we have to, that leave no one behind is crucial. The next point, my sixth point then, is to support historians in writing accurate historical narratives. The fact is we are all conditioned by what we have read in our school history textbooks. And those history textbooks are deeply flawed narratives that are presenting one community as victors and everybody else as losers. And it's presented from that particular perspective. We need to challenge that, and we need to write accurate histories. In the context of Myanmar, I mean, when you talk about Muslims being foreign, It's really interesting, isn't it? Because the lines on the map were drawn by the British, who were foreign, and the religion that's the majority religion in Myanmar is Buddhism, which is also foreign. So what is a foreigner? How does it make sense to use the word foreigner in the context of South Asia? It simply makes no sense. You can't say, if you're talking about foreign, you're talking about something that's not indigenous to the region. Well, both the lines on the map and the religions that exist are foreign. So deciding one is home and one is foreign is frankly ridiculous. So I think that's the sixth point. And then I just to finish then, we have to take political action to achieve what is necessary. For a long time, we certainly in the human rights community have said, oh, but we're not political. We are only working for human rights. But the fact is that politics is under attack, and politics is under attack by people who are not committed to the values that we share, which is one value that we all share, which is we believe in the inherent dignity and worth, the equal inherent dignity and worth of every individual. That's the value that we share as human rights people. And we have to be able to take political action to make sure that that exists. But my next point is ensure that the language of law is not. Well, sometimes we work very much through legal systems that are super exclusive. We have to break that exclusivity. And I guess my last 2 points are, one, is that we have to work transnationally. We have to work across the borders. That means civil society working across the borders. I would say it also means states working across the borders. If states don't work across the borders, they will not have an answer to climate change. They will not be able to make the just transition that's needed. And if civil society don't work beyond borders, we will always be stuck putting out little fires in different little places, when what we need to do is to collaborate to build a system against the fire. My last point is we need to share resources, and that's important. And certainly as minority rights group, we are committed to this, because ultimately the resources that exist for civil society work in Europe is far greater than the resources that exist elsewhere. And for us, the way that we tackle that is through partnership. We want to work with local actors who understand societies, and we want to be able to get those local actors to co-design projects with us, because they understand societies much better. And then for us to be able to try and seek with them for the funding that they will ultimately use and apply and implement in the countries that they work. Colleagues, it's been an honor to speak to you. We live in extremely challenging times, but I also see very, very significant green shoots of recovery. And I encourage you to focus on those. We have a tendency sometimes to just, look at the desert and think about how fast it's advancing and to be depressed by it. Depression is not a prerogative we have. We have to focus on the green shoots of recovery, and we have to work to make sure that those green shoots of recovery get knitted together to make something bigger to check the advance of the desert. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Joshua. Really wonderful statement and message. We have to think and rethink regarding this incomplete transitional justice, and we have to redefine the transitional justice for the protection and promotion the rights of the minority communities in South Asia context and also Bangladesh. And really, dignity and recognition is the very much important issues for us. Today's event for the celebration of May 18 democratic uprising in South Korea in 1980. 42 anniversary of May 18 democratic uprising we are celebrating here. Our next speaker, I would like to request our chairperson, Delwar Ahmed, please share your statement now.
Good morning. First of all, I would like to thank Joshua and Castellino for your excellent speech. It takes me back to my university days. I mean, that's a long time ago, when I was studying community management, and ethnic minorities and UK politics was one of our modules, and we did study part of colonial history. So quite a lot of facts you mentioned there. Actually, it just brings back memories. Anyway, thank you. Dear honorable guest and participants, greetings from Human Rights Development Center, HRDC. I would like to thank the 2022 Gwangju Democracy Forum and the May 18 Memorial Foundation for their great initiative for human rights and democracy. I would like to express my solidarity with the May 18 democratic uprising in Gwangju, South Korea. I also acknowledge the 42nd anniversary of the May 18 democratic uprising national ceremony and 2022 Gwangju Prize for Human Rights Award ceremony. It is a wonderful initiative of the May 18 Memorial Foundation. The session is very much important for protecting human rights in Bangladesh, to analyze the transitional justice, whether justice has been properly defined in Bangladesh. It can be discussed the relevance of applied methods and the mechanism of transitional justice process. Though we'll have to focus on the transitional justice processes of reparation to reconcile the condition of the victims of state violence. It explores whether transitional justice could be an option in establishing human rights and ensuring the practice of transitional justice in Bangladesh. Transitional justice procedures are proposed for Bangladesh to solve the issue of human rights abuses and criminals who violated human rights in 1971. In 2009, Bangladesh government decided to apply the first and foremost option of prosecution to provide justice to the victims of the atrocity of 1971. The sweeping side of the whole transitional justice process as performed in the case of Bangladesh reached such a point that the government needed to decide how it could be further managed. The state human rights need to define the transitional justice. The security forces encompassing the national police, border guards, the counterterrorism units such as Rapid Action Battalion maintain internal border security. The military, primarily the army, is responsible for the national defense, but also has some domestic security responsibilities. The security forces report to the Ministry of Home Affairs, and the military reports to the Ministry of Defense. Civilian authorities maintained effective control over the security forces. Members of the security forces committed numerous abuses, significant human rights issues, including credible reports of unlawful or arbitrary killings, including extrajudicial killings, forced disappearances, torture, or cases of cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment by the government or its agents on behalf of the government. Harsh and life-threatening prison conditions, arbitrary arrest and detentions, political prisoners, politically motivated reprisals against individuals in other country, serious problems with the independence of the judiciary, arbitrary or unlawful interference with privacy, punishment of family members for offenses allegedly committed by an individual, serious restrictions on free expressions and media, including violence or threats of violence against journalists, unjustified arrest or prosecutions of journalists, and censorship, and the existence of criminal libel and slander laws. Serious restrictions on internet freedom, substantial interference with the freedom of peaceful assembly and freedom of association, including overly restrictive laws on the organization, funding or operation of non-governmental organizations and civil society organizations, restrictions on refugees, freedom of movement, mistreatment of refugees, serious and unreasonable restrictions on political participation, serious government corruption, government restrictions on or harassment of domestic human rights organizations, lack of investigation and accountability for gender-based violence, including but not limited to domestic and intimate partner violence, sexual violence, child abuse, early and forced marriage, and other harmful practices. Crimes involving violence or threats of violence targeting members of ethnic minority groups or indigenous people, significant restrictions on independent trade unions and workers' freedom associations, and existence of worst forms of child labor. The Constitution provides for the rights to life and personal liberty. There were numerous reports, however, that the government or its agents committed arbitrary and unlawful killings. Police policy requires internal investigation of all significant uses of forces by police, including actions that resulted in serious physical injury or death, usually by a professional standards unit that reports directly to the Inspector General of Police. The government, however, neither released statistics or total killings by security personnel, nor took comprehensive measures to investigate those cases. Human rights groups expressed skepticism regarding the independence of professional standard of the units conducting those assessments and claimed citizens were being deprived of justice. In the few known instances in which the government brought charges, those found guilty generally received administrative punishment. Also, the Constitution and law prohibit torture and other cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment. Local and international human rights organizations and the media reported security forces, including those from intelligence service, police, and soldiers seconded into civilian law enforcement, employed torture and cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment. The law contains provisions allowing a magistrate to place a suspect in interrogative custody, known as remand, during which questioning of the suspect may take place without a lawyer present. Human rights organizations alleged many instances of torture occurred during remand. Some victims who filed cases under the Torture and Custodial Prevention Act were reportedly harassed and threatened, while some were forced to withdraw their cases due to fear. Just to go through the prison and detention center conditions. Prison conditions were harsh and at times life-threatening due to severe overcrowding. inadequate facilities, physical abuse, corruption, and a lack of proper sanitation and social distancing measures during the COVID-19 pandemic. There were no privately run detention facilities. Rape and domestic violence. The law only prohibits rape of girls and women by men and physical spousal abuse, but the law excludes marital rape if the girl or woman is older than 13. Conviction of rape may be punished by life imprisonment or the death penalty. Credible human rights organization found rape remained a serious issue in the country, with reported rapes throughout the year roughly keeping pace with previous years. Discrimination. The Constitution declares all citizens are equal before the law, with entitlement of equal protection under the law. It is also explicitly recognizes the equal rights of women to those of men in all spheres of the state of public life. According to human rights NGOs, the government did not always enforce the Constitution or the laws pertaining to gender equality effectively. Women do not enjoy the same legal rights or status as men in family, property, and inheritance law. According to traditional Islamic inheritance law, daughters inherit half of what sons do. Okay, the last part is about systematic racial or ethnic violence and discrimination. There were no major attacks on religious minorities motivated by transitional violent extremism. There were, however, reports of attacks on Hindu and Buddhist property and temples for political or economic reasons. And some of those faith groups stated attacks on religious structures increased during the pandemic. On March 17, I believe it was 2021, an estimated 89 houses and 8 temples in a Hindu village in Sylhet were vandalized. Media and civil society attributed the attack to hundreds of members of Hifazat Islam supporters, triggered by a resident's Facebook post criticizing a Hifazat leader for condemning Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit. After the incident, organization released a YouTube video rejecting responsibility for the attack. The government expressed regret and sent the RAB to the village. As of March 23, the police had arrested 35 individuals in connection with the attack. Members of the Hindu minority community blamed religious fundamentalist groups for the incidents, while some civil society and opposition leaders blamed the ruling party. Some other human rights groups blamed local law enforcement and administration officials for not preventing the attack. Well, obviously, it's a blame game, and the situation is quite dire, as we probably know, in Bangladesh. I'd like to thank everyone for giving me the opportunity, and I'm looking forward to the next speakers. Thank you once again from Human Rights Development Center. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Delwar Ahmed. Really excellent presentation regarding the state human rights situation and define the transitional justice in here. I would like to request our next speaker, King Mohan. He will address about the situation of Rohingya community in here. Please.
Yes, thank you for giving me this opportunity to describe our issue of what we have been facing more than 70 years ago until now. I would like to emphasize one very important issue. Our first speaker highlighted that government cannot decide whether which one is the citizen or not, like that empathize. So I would like to emphasize one thing very importantly, that this is very important. We should be know about our issue, especially the repatriation issue, because I am very glad to present my speech in form of the scholar of the Bangladesh from the different from the different field. For example, Myanmar government tried to repatriate. Sometimes they are saying that they are ready to take back the Rohingya population from the Bangladesh. Indeed, there's some of the difficulty we have been facing is that the Myanmar government tried to give up the NVC, which is called National Verification Card, which is not acceptable for the Rohingya community because of the Myanmar government have the plan to ban the Rohingya from the Bengali, they are come from the Bangladesh. The intention of the Myanmar government is that, so always they are saying that the Rohingya return to Bangladesh before World War II. This is the Myanmar government thinking that about the Rohingya. They are always saying that Rohingya from the Bangladesh. So they try to ask by accepting the NVC, the Rohingya are Bengali. If we accept the NVC, it's clear proof that we accept as a Bengali. This is the thing we should be understand. In 1982 citizenship law, which is black law, which is the international community are not accepting that law because of in that law there is a lot of human rights violence. For example, our first speaker already mentioned one of the very important quotation about government cannot decide. But in 1982 citizenship law, government have the government can decide whether which one is the citizen of Burma or not. They can decide according to this law. It is the supreme power of the government. Government can be restrict our right and everything when we can. For example, you know, maybe the current development of the Myanmar, like the NUG government, which is the shadow government of the current situation of the Burma. A lot of their minister and their diplomatic restrict and take over the citizenship of their right by the military government. It is clear proof Myanmar government have the right to stop the citizen of the any citizen when they need and when they decide because of the 1982 citizenship law, which is called black law according to international law. This is the thing we have to understand. For example, if I empathize about the repatriation issue, we all the Rohingya agree to return to our country as soon as possible. Even we are not trying to live 1 minute more here because this is not our country. We have the country, we have a land, we have the property, we have everything. So we want to go there. But we have the very difficult and complicated issue of the Rohingya because of Myanmar military, because of the Myanmar systematic, the plan of the Myanmar government. This is the thing we should understand why the Rohingya repatriation are delaying until 5 years already almost. If I empathize the topic, there's a lot of history I need to start, but I will want to start one thing. Before 1962, Rohingya are full citizen of the Burma. Every ethnic right, every citizenship right, everything Rohingya got. Even the Rohingya become the parliament member and the speaker of the parliament and the minister of the government. The Rohingya have got this kind of opportunity before 1962. When the 1962 Myanmar military took the power first time in the history of the Myanmar, at that time the new lead government started a clear operation or everything to stick out the Rohingya right from the ethnic city or citizenship. All the things Myanmar military did because of their intention is that Rohingya from the Bangladesh. When you know 1978 first clear operation start in Arkan state just because of Myanmar government want to shake the Rohingya population, their familyless, everything. And they start the persecution. For example, think about one thing very clearly. If any government want to shake the population, the responsible minister is immigration minister. Immigration minister has responsibility to shake the population of any citizen or any ethnic group, any people of any country. But the military did the one committee involving the military in the previous Nasaka, all of the security force belong in the Myanmar. Why they need to include the military? This is a job of the military. It is job of the even the police or the immigration officer, but they include the military because of the persecute the Rohingya people, so that Rohingya cannot more tolerant, patient, and they return to Bangladesh again, fast state of the refugee crisis. This is the intention of the Myanmar military to destroy Rohingya community from the right of ethnicity, from the right of citizenship. The first one. When these people return to the Myanmar, the UNHCR, Bangladesh government, and the UN sit together some proposal or agreement. Myanmar military government already accept Rohingya citizen of the Burma. They will provide the citizenship of very soon, but they did not did. They broken their promise. When Myanmar military say we will provide the citizenship of the Rohingya community, when the Rohingya returned to from the Bangladesh in 1977, at that time Myanmar military promised, but they did not did. They did the the temporary registration card, which is called another name white cat. It meant the people are not our citizenship. We need to be investigate the future more to be clear. This is the master plan of the Myanmar government. They have the master plan to destroy the Rohingya community. This is the first flow of the Rohingya have been persecuted. And the second, 1991 to 92, they start another clear operation, also the name of the citizenship issue and the shake of the population. Same issue, the Myanmar military government used the military, all of the security, the law enforcement agency to target the Rohingya population. Same the Rohingya population returned to Bangladesh until many of the Rohingya population are living in the Kutupala and the Noyafara refugee camp nearby Teknal. This is the clear proof what is the Myanmar military have the master plan. This is the thing we should be understand, the clear master plan of Myanmar government. If any society or any population, any citizen, if get the previous, the everything of the opportunity and everything like a citizen, for example, we can go to the university, you can be parliament member, you can be
connection turbulence.
I think internet connection problem.
Yes.
Just wait 1 or 2 minutes. Okay, please.
Okay, sorry, thank you. Suddenly my connection was cut out, so I am really sorry. And in 2012, communal violence happened, you know, everyone. Before 2012, I would like to empathize the clear master plan of the Myanmar government one by one. In 2010 general election, Rohingya have the get opportunity to participate in the general parliament member, like currently one of the parliament member, the Uchemang, currently living in the UAC. He's one of the parliament member of in 2010 election. In this election, Rohingya have got the opportunity to petition as a citizen, that parliament member. In 2015 election led by NLD and the Aung San Suu Kyi period time, the Rohingya cannot participate the right of the voting right and the parliament member. Think about in 2010, after 5 years, Rohingya cannot get the opportunity to be parliament member, to be voting right. They cancel out of the thing without any kind of reason. If 2010, one people have the right of the voting, how can possible? Not in 2015, not in 2020. This is the thing. The Myanmar government have the master plan to destroy Rohingya community. The name of the Bengali, the reason of they return to Bangladesh. They always given the reason. In the recently, the current military leader, Me Online, first interviewed the China media. He emphasized that the Rohingya crisis is unfinished business after World Second War. He mentioned clearly, it meant the Rohingya people told by military, the British government from the Bangladesh to labor or to something that this is their misconception and their misinformation. The Myanmar military used as a tool to destroy the Rohingya community. Another thing, when the politician or the leader, they hit more the Rohingya, they will get more support in the Myanmar. There's one of the political assumption we will always see. When the politician or the leader hit the Rohingya, they will support more as a vote or as other thing. This is the ongoing in our country. From the 2012, no Rohingya can go to the university. For example, in the Saitwe, the central city of the ICAF state, the city, around the university, all other Rohingya people are living right now, but they cannot attend the university. They are seeing in the university always what the other ethnic people are going and doing, but being of the Rohingya as a Muslim, they cannot get the opportunity to attend the university. Think about this is the one of the thing. University is for example, university is very close in my home or my area, but I cannot go to there without any kind of the reason. I think my time is, I think enough. I'm right.
Yes, I think enough. We would like to go on next.
Okay.
We can take 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you. The Myanmar government have the master plan to destroy the Rohingya community. They never accept the Rohingya as a citizen of Myanmar, as an ethnic group of the Myanmar. We have to understand this issue. Rohingya issue is very complicated issue. This also the interconnection of the Bangladesh area because of the Myanmar military saying always the Rohingya Bengali. So this is one of the geopolitical that issue. Another thing I would like to emphasize all of my senior scholar of the Bangladesh, the Rohingya also good friend of the Bangladesh because along the border, more than 200 kilometers along the border of the Arakan state and the Bangladesh, all the area Rohingya living. If right now there is no Rohingya population inside of the Arakan state, it is also threaten of the Bangladesh national security. If the Rakhine community of other community are living in the state of the Rohingya in the border, it is also threaten of the Bangladesh. So we are good friend of the Bangladesh. We are family. We are everything. So we would like to return our country as soon as possible. We are trying. Please support. We need your support. Thank you.
Thank you very much, King Mong. King Mong is a very young human rights activist, and he is working for the protection and promotion of the rights of the Rohingyas population, and he is very closely working with us. I would like to request our next speaker, Shapla Shorna Ruram, please. Muted, Shapla muted.
I'm sorry. Okay. Thank you for the volume. I would like to speak briefly on indigenous minority people's rights and transitional justice on the context of Bangladesh. While no accurate data on the number of indigenous people in Bangladesh is available, a census conducted by the government in 2011 found they are about 1.6 million. I think yet to be added more to count the total. But the internal indigenous and minority activist groups claim their population is at least 3 million or 2% of more than 160 million people in the Muslim majority country. I am just giving the background to understand the, all the matters later. Okay, there are about 54 different indigenous communities in the country, a notable portion dealing at the northern and southern plains. The rest, about 20%, are in the CST hilly areas like Chattogram. Most of the Chattogram hill tract indigenous people are Buddhist and Hindu, like Chakma, Marma, and rest of the. In the plainlands, most are Hindu, Christians, and also nature worshippers. Here to remind, our constitution, Bangladesh constitution, ensures all the citizens have equal rights, equal before law. A combined situation of indigenous and minority rights, yet over 3,800 plus attacks and massive violences on religious, linguistic minorities like indigenous Hindu, indigenous Christian, Buddhist took place between 2013 and March 2022. These attacks includes the vandalism and arson of 559 houses, at least 1,678 temples, idols, that means fetishes, and places of worship. The immediate cause of the recent violences was defamation of majority religion. Most of the attacks were based on fake posts on the social media named Facebook. I'd like to pin this. In October 2021, there were attacks on at least 90 of the 32,000 makeshift Hindu worshipping places of minorities and also major Hindus. Affected, here I have to include, we have indigenous Hindus like Banai, Orao, etc. The masterminds behind these attacks have an agenda of political opportunism and economic benefits, of course. They are not motivated by Hindu or Islamic religious beliefs, but by criminality. Some claim that these anti-government forces strategically attack minorities to put pressure on the government. Counter narratives purport that the government takes advantage of this chaotic situation to marginalize opposition. It is apparent that ruling party activists are in some cases involved in these attacks, and the government has tended to turn a blind eye. Each time attacks took place to the indigenous people with aim of land grabbing. It's the basic, I think, for economic dominance. Women and children are the mostly victim of those violations. Sometimes youths also the worst victim, even the males. In many cases, the government loses the lawsuits filed after each attack on indigenous and other minorities because the law is designated to arrest opposition members rather than prosecute perpetrators. Bangladeshi human rights organizations have agreed that the government has been negligent in protecting the country's minor communities like Hindus and indigenous Christians, indigenous Buddhists, and rest of all. Economic interests provoke criminal violences. That's the true fact. In several cases, human rights groups found that the attacks on several temples, churches in Bangladesh were well planned with the aim of grabbing the indigenous and minority communities' lands, assets. The Vested Property Act of Bangladesh, it's on 1965, has been used to grab those property. Human rights groups and civil society activists have long urged successive governments to repeal this act. In response to these demands, the governing Army League amended this act to the Vested Property Return Act of 2013 which enables confiscated properties to be reclaimed by their original owners, who are minorities. This is an example of transitional justice. However, the minorities and indigenous people have not experienced the benefit of this act yet, until now. Furthermore, the mob attacks upon indigenous people and other minority people and the houses, assets involve socio, religious, and historical factors. Feelings of proxy victimization, religious hatred, hate speech, colonial legacy, shape anti-non-Muslim sentiment in Bangladesh. All these are post 1975. In my study, Bangladesh has witnessed the rise of Islam as the state religion, and since then, Islamist narratives have become part of politics. Most of them are illiterate or less literate in that sense. In some sense, violations, they are perpetrators. It's a bitter truth. Even though secularism was restored in the constitution in 2011, Islam remains as the state religion. I beg apology. This is my study, and of course, I am non-biased here. This obscurity shows the divided nature of the country's population, which the most imposition of equal rights for minorities and indigenous communities. It is really shocking. The bitter dominance of our indigenous and minorities are like local clerics, like Hujur or such kind of Maulana or such kind. I'm not degrading the religion Islam. I think it's really holy, but the actual situation I want to explain. Local clerics who are the indigenous to the lands, sometimes their greediness or their ignorance occurs such situations, and they welcome such horrific situations. Used to have authority over the interpretation of the holy texts of Islam and could influence people's behavior. Due to increasing globalization, these local clerics have lost their sway, and outside leaders or scholars have taken control over the interpretation of the text, which sometimes clashes with the spirit of multi-faith harmony in the country. Feeling of victimization are one of the top causes of radicalization. These feelings of victimization can also be proxy victimization. Political, economic, and religious differences and communal mindset are the key factors behind the attacks, assaults, rape cases, land grabbing. This is the most important because our Madhupur, Dinajpur, Rangpur, Rajshahi, such areas are affected mostly on land grabbing, killing, threats, which have broken the trust between indigenous minorities and majorities in Bangladesh.
Shabbat, please, in now.
Okay, yet to the transitional justice and the approach to systematic or massive violations of human rights that the board provides readdress the victims and creates enhanced opportunities for the transformation of the political systems, conflicts, and other conditions that have been at the root of the abuses. Here I remind the three basic pillars of human rights to go the transitional justice. One, protection of existence. Two, protection of identity and participation. Third, non-discrimination. We demand that three pillars of human rights get prevailed multiple way in Bangladesh to secure the indigenous and minority communities. This is at the root of transitional justice is to bring solutions regarding resources, sustainability, responsibilities. Without government measures, the future of minority communities, transitional justice of Bangladesh is in grim. A democratic country must count the demands at least for the development ethics that leave no one behind. Thereby, transitional justice may bring sustainability, fair development, including on scattered grassroots, hillock, and impoverished communities. Thank you all.
Thank you, Shapla. Really, thank you very much again for your wonderful speech. I would like to request our next speaker, Barrister Taposh Kanti Bol. Dada, please share your statement for.
Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I want to thank the organizers for inviting me. My topic is about the historical perspective of religious discrimination towards the minorities of Bangladesh and the transitional justice. I would very briefly differentiate, set up the timeline first, because there would be three timelines. One will be up to the British period, what would be after the British period till 1971, when is the Pakistan, and then after 1971, what is happening. I'll just briefly say that you know that during the British period, already the first speaker has very well put out the scenario that how the imperial rulers actually, through their divide and rule principle, introduced us to these notion of this religious discrimination, ethnic discrimination that is still going on. The biggest and yet not tried discriminatory event is the partition of India and Pakistan. You know, in 1947, the biggest refugee groups were changing their countries actually, like on the basis of their religion. They are moving to India, they are moving to Pakistan, and from also East Pakistan to the West Bengal. They were moving there, and a lot of discriminations, a lot of murders, genocide, and persecution took place at that time. But yet till today, nobody blamed the British rulers for what they have done. And that discrimination continued till this day. After 1947, the Pakistan rulers, they discriminated Hindu, Buddhist, and Christians, especially the Hindu populace, terming that they are Indian agents. They discriminated Muslim peoples of Bangladesh as well, saying that they are not pure Muslims. As a result, you will see that a lot of discriminatory legislations were enacted at that time, both by the Pakistan Parliament and by their military juntas. The one biggest example is the Vested Property Act. We will all agree that that one single act is still creating ripple effect even after nearly 60 years of enactment of that act. Not only Hindus, but Buddhists, Christians, and even Muslims are suffering due to this Vested Property or Enemy Property Act. Later on, in 1971, through the War of Independence, under the leadership of the father of the nation, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, we got independent. And one of the main principles for getting the independence of the War of Independence was secular Bangladesh, where every religion will enjoy their rights equally, not on the basis of their religious or ethnic identity, but on a single identity that they are human beings. In 1972, the Constitution was enacted. In the preamble of the Constitution, and even there were no Article 2. Everywhere, everyone was equal. There was no state religion. But the situation changed after 1975, when the father of the nation was brutally murdered along with his family members. We all will see that soon after, the first thing that was amended by the Major General Ziaur Rahman is that he introduced Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim at the top of the Constitution. First time defining the Constitution as a religion. The state has a religion. And anyone who takes oath under the Constitution, even if you are a Hindu, you have to take oath under the term Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. After that, Ershad, another military junta, just to use the religion, as the first speaker and the other speakers were saying, that learning from the imperial rulers, they also introduced freedom. They also curtailed freedom of religion and introduced Islam as the state religion. There was a case in front of the Supreme Court of Bangladesh, the 8th Amendment case. But in the 8th Amendment case, other parts of the 8th Amendment were challenged, but not the state religion part. Yet still today, it is there, even though through 16th Amendment, it was said that other religious people will enjoy the same rights. However, the situation will never change. The religious and ethnic minorities, as the speaker Shapla Shorna just said, that we are facing discrimination at every stage. There are no separate school teachers for teaching the Hindu, Buddhist, and Christian religion in the schools. There are the traditional schools like schools of like Tolls and Pali schools are all vanished in the thin air. Even in the budget, more budget is offered towards the Islamic Federation rather than the trusts. So we are facing this historical discrimination, and there is no way that is getting rectified. The question is why that is not getting rectified. That is because none of these discriminations were punished. Those who are the perpetrators, they are punished. They were not punished by none of the rulers, not by the people even. We know who has done it. But look at the Ramu incident in 2012. The trial is still ongoing. Look at the Bhola incident. The trial is still ongoing. So the investigation, in fact, is ongoing, not the trial yet. So last October, the incident during the Durga Puja maybe will go unpunished. There is another new way of discrimination. You will put anything on Facebook in the name of a Hindu guy or a Buddhist guy or a Christian guy, and then you demolish their business, then you torch their house, vandalize their temples and prayer halls, because you know that you will not be tried. You will not be punished for these crimes. One of the main things is transitional justice. If after 1947, if there was a court like International Criminal Court, the British rulers should have been put into trial. Even now, I will recommend the people who are living in UK, in Australia, to file a case in the court of first instance, in the magistrate court, against the British rulers, so that they can pay compensation. They say officially sorry for the misdeeds they have committed. We should put Pakistani rulers, and still the present country Pakistan, on the dock as well for the damage they have committed as a country. Subsequently, after 1975, all the rulers who has come till 1995, and after that, in 2001, who has committed so many crimes, so many riots, and thus inspired, incited, ignited people to commit crimes against religious minorities, should be punished, should be brought to justice. How? Maybe through a new enactment of a new law. Maybe you can try them through international bodies, but you need to try them. Now, the religious discriminatory issues are settled deep in our mindset. We can't change it. We may be a political activist of a pro-liberation party, but still in mind, we maintain anti-religious mentalities, secular mentalities. So, I'm sorry, anti-secular mentalities. So we don't know that except bringing them to justice, how we can change their mindset. We need to bring them into mindset. There should be some sort of tribunal or a truth commission, so that every single person who has committed crimes against freedom of religion, or I would say anti-secular mentalities or anti-secular activities, they should be brought to justice, and they should apologize for their deeds and return the properties to the people. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot for your time. I apologize to the organizers because tomorrow I have another program, and for that I have to prepare for that. So I'll invite all of you in the Unity Council on the day, because today is the Chupnagor Genocide Day as well. So Chupnagar, you know, the largest genocide in the history of subcontinent, when nearly 12,000 people were killed, and most of them, 95% of them Hindus. The world is silent about it. So through this platform, I will demand justice for the genocide of the Chupnagar victims. So I would humbly request everyone, if you are in Dhaka, please come to the reporters unity tomorrow. Thank you, Mahbul bhai.
Thank you very much, Dada. Really wonderful speech. And Baristar Taposh Kanti Bal, he is not only an advocate, he is also human rights activist, and he is working with us from 2016 with our Human Rights Alliance in Bangladesh. I would like to request our next speaker. He will share the lesson learning and practicing and recognition of minority community in Australia. Dr. Jishu Das Gupta. Please, Dada, share your statement. Okay, please start.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
I would like to request all participants, please open your video. We can take a picture.
I think I'm not in a very best
Okay,
shape
please
at
start.
this point of time. Okay, thank you very much. First, I would like to start my speech by acknowledging the traditional owner of the land where we meet today, and I would like to pay my respect to the elders past, present, and emerging. So thanks to all the speakers. You guys have been saying some wonderful information, lots of enthusiastic, and also I think there's lots going on there. And another special thanks to Mr. Mahbul Haque for inviting me. I think I'm going to go a bit different direction today, because you guys all have lots of facts and lots of learnings, and I think so my talk will be a bit different what my understanding is, and at the same time I think what we have learned here. I think my point is more of towards the strategic development, how we can come out of a whole process, because it's been going on. We know what's happening. We have lots of information on hand, but how we were going. You might have noticed that when I started my speech, I said few things, which is an acknowledgement to the country. And this is what is a very common ground in Australia. When we start any event or anything, we do that. What it says is that I would like to acknowledge the traditional owner of the land where we meet today. And I would like to pay my respect to the elders past, present, and emerging. By saying that before starting any event or anything like that, we acknowledge the traditional owner of the land. At this present time, they are mostly the minorities here, but still there is a learning and there is something that we can learn from that. I think what we are facing every day within this transitional justice, or all these atrocities happening across the world, and especially what's happening in Bangladesh or any other places, you can name in every places, and there is minorities being subject to lots of violence and all the sorts of inhuman things that can be happened and is happening with them. But one thing is that what we are doing from our space, yes, definitely we are raising our voice, we are taking action, but what else? So I think it's something where if you can take something on board, and if I can do something on board from my side, that will be a way to go forward. I think you just need to change yourself to change the world. And I think I'm just referring back to there. So what's happening here in Australia, and we are adopting that as well. And as we go along, we are learning the path. Here in the legislation and all the places that it's been informed and it's been legalized, that if you are starting in any event, or if you are acknowledging any of the speeches and things like that, you must acknowledge the traditional owner. That's a simple thing that we are doing. By doing that, we are teaching our next generation, even us, that yes, there is a contribution of the traditional owner, there is a contribution from the ancestor that we have. And this also acknowledges being a multicultural country in Australia. We always go back to the root, and they also have sections where we can say, okay, how we can acknowledge the multicultural people. And they are embedding teaching subjects. They are introducing multicultural week and all these sorts of things. So I think the government and any of the authorities should have coming to step up to the point where they can just say, yes, we need to do something about it. Maybe force, yes, that's also one way of doing things, but I think educational freedom, and especially creating that environment for our future generation, is another way to go forward. And that's exactly what these guys are doing here. So I would like to put that forward and put that message to everyone. If you have the capacity or if you have the connection, I think take that forward and then make sure that this is being heard. In our school, in our every area, wherever you can, if we can start acknowledging the existence of the multiculturalism or the minorities, if you can put it in this way, because when I say multicultural people here, definitely the multicultural people are the minorities here. So anything happens in Bangladesh or any other places, it's involving any minorities, especially because my background from the Bangladesh, and I try to represent my Bangladesh community here. We always get this question that what's wrong with these people? Because you are coming to this country, we are accepting you with open hand. Why they cannot have this understanding within the country? So that's a big question, and I think it's need to go back to the drawing board and start looking into that. Even recently, the federal government and state government has started introducing Australia multiple languages. I've been advocating for that one. So it has been successfully, we have included more than 85 different languages. So when we are talking about specific minorities within our country and subject to this violence, I think it will take more precedence if we can start talking about all our minorities, all the minorities across the world, and you see there will be a similarity. And I think we have lots of learning from them as well. I think I will definitely pass on a huge thanks to Mahbul Bhai to bring everybody on board. And this is a discussion forum. Definitely what you guys are saying, it's really heartbreaking, and we know most of the facts, but I think it's time to act for us and time to work together and somehow introduce that culture. Even in your event, if you can think of some way to acknowledging that existence of the others, that will be a fantastic thing. So that's what we are doing here. So, and I don't go very far because I know you guys have been talking a lot of interesting things together. And if any possibility where that we can help each other, definitely I'll try my best. And thank you very much. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer from the learning perspective, but I might be hanging around maybe another 10-15 minutes, and then I have to go for my next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dada. Really wonderful and learning for us. I would like to request Joshua Castellino. Can you add 1 minute for your recommendation, and you can edit some feedback.
Yes, thank you very much, Mahbul, and thank you all the participants for your very clear and strong submissions. Really, it shows, I think, the qualities that exist within us as civil society and the commitment that we have for change. And this is really the message that I started off with, that essentially it's in bringing all of our collective expertise together and working in collaboration that we can overcome the kind of situations that we face. Let's not put too fine a point on it. We are in a crisis. This is a major crisis affecting not only our communities, in the case of Shapla especially, indigenous communities all over the world. It's not just a question of affecting our communities. It's not just a question of affecting our regions, our states. It's really a question affecting the planet. And the Interparliamentary Committee has made it very clear that climate change requires an urgent just transition. There are answers within our communities and within our cultures to all of these problems, but we need to come to the fore and we need to engage with each other in meaningful dialogue and mutual respect. And I think this is what the Gwangju Democracy Forum does so well in bringing people together across the world in moments like these. I do look forward to working with you. I support the journeys that each of you are taking. I thank you for the work that you're doing, and we at Minority Rights Group look forward to supporting the work you do. And thank you very much for the honor of participating in this.
Thank you very much. I would also like to request Delwar Ahmed if you add some feedback.
Hi, good morning. Sorry, I'd just like to share a story. I had about 5-6 years back, I had the opportunity to meet with Fakhruddin. You probably know he was the one of the major person during this 2006 and 8. And I did ask him, because I had a long conversation with him. We were driving to an event. And I did ask him, what are the main issues in Bangladesh? And he replied, he said to me, there is only one issue, and that is nobody is respecting the law and order. He said, everybody, like from public to the high office. And he gave me some examples, and I can't go through all of this. And I think this applies to everybody. I think once we start respecting the law and order, even the public, I think, and he said to me, like 90% of the issues in Bangladesh will be resolved if we all started respecting and following the law and order. And I think that's something I think we can all take. And I'd also like to thank everyone for your valuable speech. It was really interesting, and I've actually learned a lot from it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to request Farad Hussain, please sum up the today's session and vote of thanks.
Thank you very much for all speakers for their nice discussions, and this is really very much a good discussions, and we understood that is the problems and the issues and how the indigenous people are facing some discriminations on this step. And this is really very much important for us that now we are living in the global village. So this is very important, and we should realize that is that every people has a dignity, and we also realize that we have the own constitutions that they were describing about the rights of the citizens. So it was really very much important to make sure that all the state that they will confirm that their rights of the people. So I think that it is very much important as the human rights defender that we need to work on these issues more and more. And sometimes we are really facing some problems from the government and from the state. So this is really very much important, and I really thanks to the all speakers and their saying their views and the situations, and they're nicely analyzing their problems and their citizens' problems. So finally, I will think that is it would be possible if the meeting can help us to work on it, and because there are a lot of scopes and a lot of opportunities to collectively raise the voice against the discriminations. So finally, I would like to thanks to all speakers for sharing their views and points, and I also thanks to Mr. Mahbul for arranging these nice sessions, and I really very much happy that I one of the participants in this great event. Thank you once again. Thank you so much to all speakers and all friends and all development colleagues for sharing their nice views and experience and their feelings on these issues. Once again, thank you so much.
Thank you very much for this wonderful session, and we express our solidarity with the May 18 democratic uprising, and also really I am very much happy to receive the great statement Joshua Castellino, really wonderful statement, and I believe that Minority Rights Group International stand with us and to continue our movement for the protection and promotion rights of minorities in South Asia. Thank you very much. See you again today's session. We concluded here. Thank you.